Hey Enneagram friend, this is Abby Rodriguez, your certified and IEA accredited Enneagram teacher and coach. In this space, I'll give you a sneak peek into real live coaching sessions and teach you how to apply the wisdom of the Enneagram into your life for personal growth. The invitation each episode is to take on a posture of curiosity about yourself and others, so that you can shift from merely surviving to fully thriving in your everyday life. Visit my website at abbyrodriguez.com and listen into this episode to learn more. In this episode, I share the coaching space with an Enneagram 5 that's a working mother of 5 kiddos ranging from infant to teenager. We explore how to balance the often overwhelming expectations of motherhood with the personal needs to have alone time. Whether you're an Enneagram 5 or not, I think all mothers out there can relate to how overwhelming it can be at times to balance your needs with the demands of parenthood. I also share in this episode my personal opinion about Enneagram Wings, so let's see if you agree with me or not. Okay, friends, let's take on a posture of curiosity as you listen in to my coaching conversation. I'd love to just hear what feels most helpful to explore during our coaching time together.
Yeah, I was trying to think about it, and really, I think what I need the most help with is balance.
Yeah.
And like I said, just with family and needing a lot of alone time to recharge, but then having such a big family, I feel like I have a lot of guilt sometimes, but I also feel like I need a lot of extra time to feel like me.
Yeah.
And then what I said too about wings, I feel like that's why I mistyped myself, honestly. I started this journey thinking I was a 9. And then as I went along, I was like, no, I'm a 4 with a 5 wing. And then one of my best friends was like, you're a 5. And I don't know why. I think the stereotypes hung me up for a long time, but I'm a 5 wing 4. And then this past year, I think I got hung up in 6. I think I'm not balanced in my wings at all. And I think my 6 kind of took over. And so I would like to, look at that too and kind of see how that works, because I don't know that much about that. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, so let's start with this first piece. So just talking through parenting, right? There's a lot that happens in that role, but you also had put in there that you have 5 kiddos in your blended family. Is that right? Yes. Okay. And so as you think about this need for balance, what comes to mind? What are the areas that feel either most overwhelming or most, out of sync? Like, what comes to mind when you say balance?
I think for me, it's really hard because I work full time and I'm a secretary. So here I'm already in a zone that's not super comfortable for me, and it's also really draining. So then I go from that, and I literally have a 5-minute drive from work until I'm with my kids. I don't really have time to process my day in between. It's just like one to another. And then I get home and I just feel bombarded, and I don't know how to process all of that at once, if that makes sense. Like, I tell my husband, I'm glitching out. Like, it's too much. Too many. And they're all different ages. So they're in all different stages. We have a 17-year-old, 15-year-old, 9-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old.
Oh my goodness.
I just feel like I'm being pulled in all these different directions. And it's just really tricky.
Yeah. So when you had mentioned just this brief buffer that you have of you go from work, you have your 5-minute commute buffer before you go into mom mode. Do you mention that specifically because you feel like you need a longer buffer? Like, is that part of what feels like the need is here?
I think so. Yeah, for sure.
Is there a way for you to manufacture that, right? You can't make your commute longer, but almost to manufacture that a little bit of sitting in your car for a little bit before you leave, or even if it was just a I don't know what the time is. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10 extra minutes, but is there an amount of time that you could create even just a buffer to transition hats?
Yeah, I could for sure. I think too, I just have this like urgency of like, okay, because I kind of create that buffer more so in the evening. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I gotta hurry and pick the kids up so then we can go home and do all of our evening activities. And then 8 o'clock, I want to be in my room, in my bed, reading or doing something I want for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's maybe it's me. I'm doing it. I'm creating this, urgency so that I can get to that space. Now, when 8 o'clock rolls around and kids are in bed and things aren't exactly how I planned for them to be, then I kind of get irritated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And into that overwhelmed space, right? Because you're getting depleted.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, we always talk about fives enter the work day, the day in general with so much energy, and you're just trying to get to your bed before you hit empty. So if kids don't get into their bed by 8, you're running on fumes, and that's not so great for our patience or kindness in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah. So as you think about some of that rushing into switching the role of, into parenting, because then we're also trying to get to this deadline of 8 o'clock to transition out of mom mode. I wonder if there's space for you just to allocate some of that evening time into a little bit of a buffer so that you can show up well into being a mom, right? Because, when we are switching hats quickly, when we are overwhelmed before we even start in that space of being a mom, that's not it's not as life-giving as it could be, right? It's like we're just trying to survive it rather than it feeling like, yay, I get to see you and I get to hear about your day and I want to celebrate, or, oh, that was such a bummer that happened today, right? These moments that we want to share. But if we don't give ourselves some space to actually be present and ready to walk into that role, we're just walking from one space of overwhelm to another space. And so just a curiosity if there's a way for you to give yourself even just a little bit of a buffer to take a breath and to collect your thoughts.
Yeah, I definitely could do that for sure. Yeah. I actually wrote that down here that I have a hard time being present because I am thinking about when I'm going to get that next break, when I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
get time for me. So
Yeah.
definitely, I know with me and my schedule right now, I work 4 10s. So a lot of the times, 5 o'clock, most of my coworkers are gone. I could stay just even at work. It's a quiet space and sit down and even maybe meditate or just do something like you said to process the day instead of rushing to the next thing. So
Yeah. Do you have a meditation practice? You mentioned meditating. Is that a practice that you have?
that's something I've done the last couple of years. I try to
Mm-hmm.
at least 10 to 15 minutes a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even, giving yourself that space, I mean, even just taking 15 minutes to do a meditation practice, whether that is on your own or guided, that can really change the way that you show up into that space of it feeling like more life giving to transition into it. Yeah. The other piece of that too, oftentimes fives will describe some of what you're saying of it's hard to be present because so much is happening in your mind, whether that is the to-do list or an idea that you're kind of chasing or trying to problem solve, whether that is something you need to do for work or even just something you're really excited about and interested in. And the problem is, even though that is an interesting space, fives often talk about their mind, the world of the mind being the most interesting part of their reality. It also takes energy to do that, to have all of that thought process and the wheels turning. And in that, it takes energy. It also, though, what you're describing of it removes you from the present moment. And sometimes in that, when you're kind of withdrawing into your inner world, fives unintentionally invite intrusion because they're withdrawing, because you've stopped communicating in the conversation, it's obvious that you've, accidentally stopped listening or whatever it is, then your kiddo asks more questions or they get really reactive. And now we have this big emotion that we need to solve, or not solve, but be present in with our kiddo, right? And so it's almost the type kind of self-sabotages by withdrawing into your inner world, and then you actually invite more intrusion. Does that resonate in your experience?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. As you are saying that, are there things that are coming to mind?
Oh, yeah. I can think of examples today. Even just when I'm trying to focus and do something, it's constant mommy, mommy, mommy. And I even said, what about daddy, daddy, daddy? Like, where's dad in all of this, And yeah. And it seems like, too, when I'm behind a door, that's when they want me the most. And that's kind of where, like I said, I feel guilty sometimes because that's what I do. I do tend to isolate myself away as a protective act, right?
Yeah.
But still, I would like to, like you said, figure out maybe I can't do that all the time. And I feel like even this past year, it's gotten worse. Like I almost I do feel more comfortable being isolated,
Yeah.
but I also know that's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I've
Yeah.
struggled.
Yeah. And, there's nothing wrong with having moments of withdrawing, moments of being isolated, of, recovering away. It's just when it gets out of balance and it becomes a default, or we do it and we don't even realize we've shut the door, and our kiddos are still on the other side saying mommy, mommy, mommy. But what I think, just having that awareness around your type 5 structure of just needing time away, right? Whether that is physical space or even just being able to mentally go into that, the inner world, the mind of your thoughts. And so instead of doing it as a reaction, acknowledging that it's a need and building in some space for it. So whether that is, a buffer before you leave work coming back to home, or saying to your husband something simple like, what was the phrase that you used, that you're glitching out? Yes. So using some of those phrases that so that it's not this emergency, but of like, I just need 5 minutes, rather than walking away and not letting people know. Sometimes when it feels really overwhelming, it feels like there's too much neediness around, that type 5 structure just instantly wants to protect itself by withdrawing away. And in that, you don't always let people know that you're leaving. And so even just a simple thing of, mommy needs 5 minutes, or, I need some help, husband, please help me in giving me some, a few minutes away. Because if you, even just those short breaks, taking some time to recollect your thoughts, or breathing for a moment, right? There's so many short meditations, even mantras that you can take on of, I do have enough, or there is an abundance. There is enough resources for me to be present. I can be present, right? So some of these things that we're just calling ourselves back into the present moment, not because we're trying to trick ourselves or like fake confidence, but just giving yourself the kindness of breathing for just a few moments, whether that is communicating to your kiddos, and especially having some older kiddos, right? That can take, the little ones for just a few minutes for you to breathe. That is so much more of a kindness of, I need to withdraw for a minute, but I'm going to let you know that I'm withdrawing. And part of that with kiddos is letting them know, and I'm coming back again, right? It's not just, this is too much, and now I've ghosted the situation and withdrawn away. But instead of, I just need a few minutes and I will come right back to continue this board game. I will come right back to finishing dinner. I will come right back to whatever it is that you're doing. And really, you're letting them know, I have needs. That's okay. Everyone has needs. You have needs. I'm communicating them, but I'm also letting you know I'm going to come back. As I say that to you, how does that land in your experience?
Um, that's very accurate. I don't say anything when I am feeling that way. I will just disappear. And then again, like I said, it's the kids will follow me. Then I still, even though I'm behind the door, I don't feel like I'm getting that break that I need because I know on the other side of the door, they're needing me. So,
Yeah. Right. It's still draining. It's like you can just feel the energy of their need across the other side of the door.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So as I offer that suggestion of communicating, I need to step away for a minute and I will come back. Does that feel realistic in your, you know, yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
obviously it's going to look different between, the little ones and the teenagers, right? There's a different capacity to handle that. Um, yeah. But even just thinking about, you know, when we, um, when we leave a space without acknowledging that it's happening, it invites more intrusion.
Hmm. That makes
Yeah.
sense. I never thought of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In those times when you all of a sudden need to withdraw away, do you know that it's happening, or do you sometimes just find yourself with the door in front of you and the kids are on the other side?
I honestly, through learning about my Enneagram type, I have become way more self-aware
Yeah.
and I can feel it and I can recognize that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. When you say feel it, what does that mean for you?
I just get kind of internally just amped up, like I can feel it and then I will, like I said, glitch out. That's when I just can't handle anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, just overwhelm.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's
It
usually like noise, like for example, if we get home and usually it's me and our three youngest kids, I if the kids each want a snack and then they want the TV on and then I'm trying to make dinner and oh if someone comes to the door then the dogs start barking. I That's just too much. I will turn the TV off and say everyone needs to be quiet because I can't even concentrate. I can't make
yeah.
dinner at this point because I can't even process all of that at one time.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a lot. That's a lot. Even as you were describing that, I feel like I could feel myself getting anxious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And in some of those spaces too, as you have this aware, so first off, I want to say it's incredible that you have an awareness of it happening, right? I mean, sometimes, especially before we have Enneagram language, we just have these habits and these patterns. Sometimes they cause problems, so other people inform us of them. But sometimes it's really hard to know that it's happening in the moment, especially for fives. Even you describing that physical felt sense of like feeling it. That's really helpful because sometimes fives can get so heady and so intellectual or just cognitive thinking space that they get really detached from their bodies, the physical felt sense of overwhelm for them. And so it's helpful that you even have that and know that it's coming before it's overloaded and, yeah.
Does a lot of the times present as like a headache, like a
Mm-hmm.
dull, like pulsing headache until I can get rid of some of the noise and then it will calm down.
Yeah. An invitation there, just even being able to name it as it feeling like that pulsing headache, is when things are slowly starting to become chaotic to kind of check in with yourself. So even, especially as someone that meditates, taking a deep breath, almost like a body scan quickly of like feeling your feet on the ground, your legs, your back, your arms, your felt sense, because sometimes there's actually this slow buildup that's happening before this is way chaotic and I have to be out of this or we have to turn off the volume. And so if you can notice it in the slow buildup, you can kind of regulate your nervous system. So you can, even before it becomes this is way too much, that part of it's too much. But if I go to this other room, I can keep playing this board game with my kiddo, or I can keep making lunch if I ask one of my, teenagers to help with XYZ, right? Because it's not overload. You're just aware of it slowly building up on you. Does that make sense?
does make sense. I think that's something I have a hard time with too, delegating, because I feel like I should be able to handle it, all of it,
Hmm.
do it all, and I definitely can't. So
Yeah.
that's something I need to work on as well.
Yeah. And even there, it's that type five structure of just not wanting to be dependent on others. And I say that as a kindness of like it's just so ingrained. And so in those moments when you notice it, that's a great observation, but also to be kind to yourself rather than, oh, I should have delegated. I should have asked for help, right? Being kind of like, yeah, I maybe could have asked for help here. So next time this happens, I'm going to do that. Um, but it's tricky, right? Because the threat for fives is when you feel helpless, and being dependent on others feels like a form of being helpless of like I should be able to do this on my own and I can't, and it just rubs up against that type 5 structure.
Hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Even today, to plan for this, I was like waiting till the last minute to ask for help with the kids. So that's definitely something that I struggle with, asking for help in
Yeah.
all areas. I mean, it's asking my parents. I should be able to easily do that. But again, like you said, it's me not wanting to be helpless. Like I can
Hmm.
do it and I don't want to have to rely on anyone else.
Hmm. Yeah. And even as you talk through that, I wonder if there's an invitation there to almost reframe, um, to reframe it a little bit, right? So with that type 5 structure, that orientation towards wanting to be competent, and even just reframing it as the most competent version of me doing this is asking for help. The most competent version of me thriving in this area is delegating. And so that it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm not enough. I don't have what I need. I've been depleted. And now, as a last resort, I'm asking or reaching out for help or for need, but instead choosing to kind of reframe it of no, this is part of what we do so that we have what we need, and my kiddos have what they need, and this is the best way that I can be a mom and show up in this space. Yeah. Yeah. Um, you talked also about in this past season just feeling like your six wing came online more. So, talk through some of that, or maybe even your curiosity around the four and six wing. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, so with the four, I honestly thought I was a four for a while. And I haven't explored the six wing too much, but having talked to someone and did like a typing interview,
Yeah.
did seem more like I was leaning on that six this past year. And then even recently talking with a counselor, she knows a little bit about the Enneagram. And probably by the third time in, she was like, you're a five or a six. Like you're right in there. Like, so I don't know. I was hoping to get more information about that from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you say that your six wing came online more this past year, what were some of the things that you were noticing?
Anxiety. I've
Yeah.
always had a little bit of anxiety, but it like shot through the roof.
Yeah.
And just like that more paranoid thinking and I mean it took over. Like
Yeah.
I used to not be like that at all. So I don't know. It was like extreme. Whereas like with the four, I related so much to it. I mistyped myself. So I definitely didn't play in that six very much until
Mm-hmm.
recently.
Yeah. When
So
you say,
stress
yeah.
and I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you say that anxiety, the more paranoia and those pieces, um, I'm assuming as we're coming out of the pandemic in this past year, is that a lot of what created that, or were there other pieces that caused that worry or concern to come more online?
There was a lot. Like we just had our fifth baby. Uh,
Yeah.
we sold a house. We moved back in with our families. So we were kind of back and forth, which then that kind of brought up childhood wounds, which is when I started learning more about the Enneagram. And then, quarantine happened and we were still with family while our home was being built. So we were not in a normal situation when that happened. Plus, then childhood stuff coming through. I think in a weird way, it was amazing because I grew so much and learned so much about myself through all of that.
Yeah.
Just amplified a lot of things I needed to work on. And maybe, I don't know, the six, I mean, I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
No, you're okay. Yeah. So lots of transitions, lots of new things coming. It also sounds like with some of those things, a lot less privacy or ability to have your own space, both with having a new baby coming into the world as well as living with other family members. And so that is very overwhelming for the type 5 structure, right? There's just a lot of intrusion and feeling like there's less of an ability to step away. And that's a lot. That's a hard year. Mm-hmm. It's a hard year. Yeah. So, when we talk about wings, it's funny. I had a coaching session with a couple today, and we talked briefly about wings. It was, our 7th out of 8 sessions. And I said, I feel like I need to talk to you guys about this because it feels hard for you to go through coaching without us having talked about this at all. But I think from the tradition that I come from and maybe just my experience, I'm never that concerned about wings. And here's why. A lot of the work that you can do in being more intentional and increasing awareness and balancing out some of these aspects that are really exhausting for you or are just not life-giving in the way that you want to show up in your relationships or show up even in your professional life. They have really little to do with wings. They have very much to do with your dominant type or even your subtype. And I know that you had said that you were dominant 1-to-1 sexual energy. So, but with that, I think people always lead with the wings because it feels like another descriptor. And it's not that they're not helpful, right? There's some sense of explaining some of the differences of how the type 5 structure shows up for you as opposed to someone else, or even some of the contradictions we feel in ourselves of like, I know I'm a 5, but I feel like I do a lot of this. So anyways, I give that disclaimer so that it doesn't feel like something that you have to get to the bottom of, because you could have balanced wings. You're leaning on one really heavily as you were discerning your type, so much so that it felt like you might be a 4. And then also in this past season with a lot of transition and a lot of intrusion, having more of the some of that, the worry and hypervigilance, maybe even of the 6. And so it sounds like there's both there. So, in general, I always tell people, the best way to discern your wings is by learning about all the 9 numbers. Oftentimes, if you go to workshops, you'll just hear more about it. So as you hear about the 4 structure, as you hear about the 6 structure, hearing what you resonate with more. That type 4 structure, a lot of the things that were, I guess I should ask, when you were first discerning, it's so much so that it felt like you might be a 4. What were the pieces of the 4 that were resonating most with you?
Oh gosh, now I'm not even gonna remember. Is this a 5 thing to need to be prepared for these questions? Because I don't know. I don't remember. I talked with the coach at that point too, and I was still withdrawn 4, 9, 5, like kind of bouncing around.
Yeah.
I honestly, my brain just like.
It's okay. So it is okay. And also, sometimes we say that for a type 5, there can be a long pause because they're filing through all the archives of information that they've collected. But also sometimes it is, there's no response because it's truly like, I don't have an answer for that. So I can't just like spitball, make up something like I can't wing it. Like I don't have an answer. So the answer is like, does not compute, so that's okay.
Well, and that's the funny part coming into this. I'm like, oh, this will be so fun. I know so much about the Enneagram. But then I also get nervous because I'm like, no, I don't. I don't know what I'm talking about. Clearly, I can't even think what the four is right now. And so this happens to me a lot. And I honestly feel like it holds me back because I feel like I can't know enough information to just freely talk about a subject and not at some point feel deluded because it does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
I struggle with that too.
Yeah. No, and I just as a to offer some solidarity, that's very true for the type 5 structure of it's almost like I can't show you the picture yet because I don't have all the puzzle pieces put into there to fully articulate what I think or know about this. And so, where other people are externally processing or they're spitballing ideas, it's just really hard in the way that you process information. That's just part of how you're naturally created. And so be kind and gracious to yourself in that. It's okay to observe it and to consider, okay, it feels like I could have maybe offered half of my idea, right? And even to give a disclaimer of this isn't fully fleshed out, but here's my initial thought. Or here's part of what I'm thinking, but I haven't thought about how to solve it. So I don't know if that's helpful to let you know what I'm thinking about and just give some disclaimers to it. Because sometimes it can help fulfill that need to know and to be competent while also acknowledging, like, I don't want to wait for several weeks before I say anything in this meeting because I do have some initial A through B thoughts, A through D thoughts. I just don't have the whole alphabet yet.
Yeah, that would be good for me to work on that because I would say I'm getting better, but there was a few years where if I didn't fully have something thought out, I'm not even going to acknowledge anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in that, sometimes there are spaces where that's okay, right? You're observing that, you notice that it's happening for you, and it feels like, yeah, there's a lot of people that really care about this. I have thoughts, but I don't know that I'm super passionate about this, and that's okay. But also in observing it, sometimes that rationale of what I just described is actually a way to justify isolating yourself, and really people needed your presence in that because it was a really calm presence of I'm not super worked out about this, but here are some logical thoughts, or I'm not really biased in this because I don't care what decision you make, but here's some objective thoughts. That's one of the gifts that you can offer in a way that's really different than a lot of the other types of just being much more objective, right? We all have bias. It's hard to get away from that completely. But fives can offer this gift of choosing to step away and to not be so swept up in their emotions about something and to be really objective. And so your thought process might really be a gift. And so offering that with this intention of this isn't all worked out yet, but here's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else as we kind of close out our very brief time together, but any additional thoughts or even sometimes it's helpful for people just to say aloud what they're taking away. So this is what felt helpful. This is what I want to be curious about. This is what I still have more questions about. Just to kind of close out the space again, acknowledging that it's very brief.
Yeah, definitely what you said about taking that time transitioning. I'm definitely going to try that this week and see if that helps me be more present at home at the end of the day. And then as far as like continuing, I think now that you said the wings don't matter as much, I don't know why for me it does. Like maybe I've over identified with that. But I definitely want to go back through and kind of read a little bit more about the 4 and the 6 and how I can balance that. So yeah. And I
Yeah.
really appreciate this. This was awesome. It was nice to
Yeah.
meet you, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I so appreciate you being in this space and being willing, I think there's a lot of intrigue and curiosity that can fuel a coaching space for fives, but it can also feel a little intimidating of, you want me to think about what I feel about this on the fly, right? And so I appreciate your willingness to step into that. Because it's such a beneficial space to be in. And also just to offer a resource for as you continue to research and learn. First resource is The Wisdom of the Enneagram. They do a really good job. So Risso and Hudson, I don't know if you have this book yet, but they do a really good job of talking through the wings. They also talk about the high side and the low side of wings, which I think is helpful. And so to see what you're not going to identify with every single word that's written about your wing. I always try to give that disclaimer. But just as you're further looking into it. And I think too, your wings are both resources for you. And so as you learn more about the 4 and learn more about the 6, in the same way that there can be some bad habits that come from those, they're also resources, and it balances you out, right? The 4 and the 6 on either side, they balance out some of the tendencies of the type 5 structure. And so that's helpful too. It's also just, for type 5s, once you identify a problem, you typically want to get to the bottom of it. So I also appreciate the search.
Yes. I was gonna say too, it's funny, my husband was actually very surprised that I even submitted the questionnaire because of that. He's like, you think something's a good idea, and then you do it, and then you commit, and the closer it gets, he's like, you're gonna back out. And I had that feeling of, I'm not prepared for this. Maybe I should just email her and tell her, no, I can't go through with it. But honestly, my motivator was that through this process, I had a really hard time finding any female 5s that I could relate to. And
Yeah.
I still question sometimes if I'm a 5, but I go back to my core, and I really, really like the soul child theory. I relate so much to that. I know for sure I'm a 5. So I just hope if there's any other female 5s listening to this, that I helped them maybe validate some of that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And that is often too what causes people to be really drawn into workshop spaces, just to have that sense of, interacting with other people from your type. So the language helps with your language about your experience. And so I love that. What a gift to offer, just your narrative, your story. So thank you. Hey, Enneagram friend. Are you interested in learning more about how to use the Enneagram in your everyday life? I'd love for you to join one of the upcoming workshop series that I hold over Zoom. If you're new to the Enneagram, join the Enneagram Foundation series. It's helpful in learning foundational knowledge to use the Enneagram, but also to help you clarify your type if you're still discerning. If you are finding yourself in a season of being stressed or exhausted or maybe overwhelmed, join the Growth and Self-Care series. In that series, we learn more about your natural stress response, how to better manage it, and also how to incorporate mindfulness practices to be more balanced in our responses. Or if you're just trying to do relationships better understand your spouse, your mother-in-law, your coworkers, or really any relationship in your life, join the Enneagram and Relationships Workshop series. All of these series are coming up this season, and there's always new groups forming. The groups are limited to 15 participants because they're interactive and discussion-based, so you can truly learn the system and learn how to apply it in your everyday life. The workshop series fill up quickly, so register now at abbyrodriguez.com/Enneagram-sessions. I'll see you there.